Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I am your teacher, Simi. This is my lecture number 15 for grade Prio, and today we have a history class. For today, we are going to start with chapter number 4, which is how important was the work of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan to the development of the Pakistan movement in the 19th century. Sir Syed Ahmad Taqi bin Syed Muhammad Muttaqi, commonly known as Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, was an Islamic reformer and philosopher of 19th century in British India. He was born into a family with strong debts to the Mughal court. He studied the Quran and sciences within the court. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was a great Muslim scholar and reformer. He awakened the Muslims from their slumber or sleep. He awakened the Muslim from sleep, from a deep sleep, to put up a struggle for the revival of their past position of eminence. He was born on 17 October 1817 in Delhi. His father's name was Mir Muttaqi and his mother was Azizun Nisa. His maternal grandfather or Nana was Khwaja Fariduddin. Khwaja Fariduddin had twice served as Prime Minister of Mughal Emperor and held trustworthy position under the East India Company. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan came from a wealthy family which was well known and respected in the area. Great care was taken by his father to ensure that he received a high quality education. He got his primary education from his maternal grandfather, which includes study of Holy Quran, Arabic, and Persian literature. Later, he also acquired excellence in history, mathematics, and medicine. He had also been introduced to some of India's most able writers and had developed a love for literature. In 1838, Sir Syed's father died and he was forced to seek employment. He joined East India Company as record keeper, which is known as Naib Munshi. He quickly rose from a lowly position in the legal system to become a judge in Delhi in 1846. That year, he wrote his well known book on archaeology called the Athar al Sanadid. When the War of Independence broke out in 1857, Sir Syed was working as chief judge in Bijnor and is said to have saved the lives of many women and children during the fighting. In return for his loyalty, the British offered him an estate and state with a large income, but he refused the offer. His belief that armed uprising against the British was pointless made him unpopular with some Muslims. But it did not stop him from working towards a reconciliation between the Muslim British and the Muslim community after the war. Reconciliation means to restore the friendship or to restore a good relationship between the Muslim and the British community, especially after the war, because British accused Muslims responsible for the War of Independence. He was appointed Chief Justice in Moradabad and later was transferred to Ghazipur in 1864. He was transferred to Aligarh where he played an important part in establishing a new college. In 1876, he retired from his work in the law to concentrate on running the college and to devote himself to improving the position of Muslims in subcontinent through education. Aligarh became the center of Muslim Renaissance. Renaissance means revival, so that became a center for the Muslims' revival. He wrote many books for Muslims' revival, but some of the important books are Asar Sanadid, which is also known as Athar Sanadid, Risla Asbabe Baghawat Hind, Indian Mussalmans, Essay on the Life of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He was honored in different ways, like he worked as a member of Governor General's Legislative Council. He was appointed as member of Public Service Commission in 1887, and the government of that time centered the title of Sir on him, and he was made a Knight Commander of the Star of India. He was died on 27th March 1898 at Aligarh, India, having served his fellow Muslims in a way which few had rivaled. The Aligarh movement was founded by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, the greatest Muslim educationist of the 19th century. The services which Sir Syed Ahmad Khan rendered for the Muslims are known as the Aligarh movement in the history of Muslims. Sir Syed wanted to see the Muslims united and prospering. He also wanted to see an improvement in their economic, social, political, and religious fortunes. So he made this ambition his life's work, and because so much of his effort revolved around a Muslim Renaissance taking place in Aligarh. He is said to have founded the Aligarh movement. Aligarh movement was aimed at apprising the British that Muslims are not only responsible for the war, and therefore the undue wrath should not be inflicted to them. Undue wrath means the extreme anger of the British that should not be inflicted to the Muslims. To persuade the Muslims to get modern education and exhibit moderate outlook in every sphere of life. Sir Said was extremely unhappy about the position of the Muslims in subcontinent. Since the days of the Mughal Empire, their social and economic status had declined sharply. The role of Muslims in the War of Independence had led to a further decline in their fortunes as the British took measures to ensure that their control would not be subject to further challenge. After the War of Independence of 1857, the British did not trust on Muslims. According to them, British thought Muslims were only cause of war of independence. As a result, they adopted policy of oppression and repression towards Muslims. Suffering of Muslims doubled when Muslims refused to send their children to missionary European and government schools because they hated English language. Sir Said felt that the poor status of the Muslim was due to the way they were treated as second class citizens by the British and the Hindus, but that they also had to take some of the responsibility themselves. Many Muslims considered the British to be a little more than invaders. Invader means like the foreign attackers or the foreign invaders or the foreign attackers in India and wanted nothing to do with them. Sir Syed believed that the Muslim community had to accept that the British were rulers who intended to stay for many years, and the Muslim position could only be improved if they adopted a more positive approach to the British. And they needed to accept more British ideas and to take advantage of British education. If they did not, then the Hindus would continue to prosper and because of their more cooperative approach. The British government excluded the uh, Muslims from reasonable government jobs. I'm really sorry for the mistake here. The line is repeated. In government office of Calcutta, a Mohammedan Muslim could hope only for any post above the rank of a porter, a messenger or a filler of ink pots. The main objectives of Aligarh movement were like to create an atmosphere of mutual understanding between the British government and Muslims, and to persuade Muslims to learn English education, to persuade Muslims to abstain from politics of agitation, and to produce an intellectual class from amongst the Muslim community. In your book, like the central aims of the Aligarh movement were improve relations between the British and Muslim communities by removing British doubts about Muslim loyalty and Muslims' doubt about British intention because British accused Muslims as responsible for the War of Independence, and they were saying that the Muslims were not loyal. But Muslims were also had some intentions, like they considered British as the foreign attackers or foreign invaders. The second aim was to improve the social and economic position of Muslims by encouraging them to receive Western education and take a post in the civil services and army. As Sir Syed said, that to compete the British, this is the only way to get their education and to get some important seats in the government, and then we can compete the British government. The third aim was to increase the political awareness of the Muslim community in order to make them aware of the threat of their position from the Hindus' policies of cooperation with the British. The first aim of the Aligarh movement was the improving relations between British and the Muslim communities. Sir Said believed that the position of the Muslims in the subcontinent could only be improved if relations with the British were improved by the Muslims gained higher quality education. There were two major obstacles to good relationships. Obstacles to poverty. There were two major obstacles to good relationships. The first one was like the British had put the entire responsibility for the war in independence in 1857 on the Muslims. As a result, they carried out policies of repression against the Muslims after 1857. The Hindus and other religious groups were considered to be loyal and prepared to assist in governing India, but the Muslims were seen as rebellious and unhelpful. Even as early as 1843, the British Governor General had stated, I cannot close my eyes to the belief that the Muslim race is fundamentally hostile to us. It means like they are showing opposition to us. Our true policy is to reconcile with the Hindus. So their policy was to restore their relationship with Hindus only. Sir Said wanted to ensure that this false view was corrected. The second obstacle was there was a deep seated resentment of the British among many in the Muslim community. Cersei wanted to ensure that the benefits and advantages of British rule, in particular in the areas of science and technology, were embraced by the Muslim community to improve the lives of the masses. To remove the obstacles, Cersei tried to convince the British that the Muslims were loyal, and he also tried to convince the Muslim community that the British were not the foreign attackers or the invaders. For convincing the British, in 1860 Sir Said wrote The Loyal Mohammedans of India, in which he wrote about the Muslim leaders of the Muslim people who remained loyal during the War of Independence. In this work, he defended the Muslims from the British accusation that they were disloyal. He gave a detailed account of the loyal services which Muslims had given and named various Muslims who had shown particular loyalty to the British. At the same time, he called on the British to end their hostility or their opposition towards the Muslim community. In order to convince the British that they were wrong to put the full blame for the events of 1857 on the Muslims, Sir Said wrote a pamphlet. That pamphlet was called as Essay on the Causes of the Indian Revolt. In this, he pointed out the main reasons for the uprising, and these were the lack of representation for Indians in the government of the country, the forcible conversion of Muslims to Christianity, and the poor management of the Indian army. He also listed many other measures taken by the British which created dissatisfaction and led to resentment among the Muslim community. So he showed all the reasons to the British government that because of those reasons, uh, Muslims fought against them. This pamphlet was circulated free amongst the British officials in India and was also sent to members of parliament in England. Even members of the royal family received copies. Some British officers were angered by what Sir Said wrote as he seemed to be blaming them for the uprising. Others read what he wrote with sympathy and accepted that there was truth in his words. Sir Said also tried to clear up misunderstanding amongst the British who resented being called Nadarat by the Muslims. The British thought that this was an insult, but Sir Said pointed out that the word came from Nasir, an Arabic word meaning helper. So the term was a reflection of the positive image Muslims had of the British, not an insult. So he wanted to clear the Muslims' image in the British mind, and he wanted to clarify British image into the Muslim minds. For convincing the Muslims, Sir Said was aware that the British knew very little about Islam. Indeed, on a visit to England, he was so offended, or we can say annoyed or displeased by an English book on the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that he immediately wrote his own work, correcting many of the errors of that book. It was also true, however, that the Muslims in India knew very little about Christianity. He tried to overcome this by writing the Tabayan al-Kalam, in which he pointed out the similarities between the two religions, the Islam and the Christianity. Due to lack of resources, the work was not finished, but it showed Sir Syed's commitment to improving relations between the British and the Muslim. So he was actually working for the reconciliation of the Muslims and the British community. Another example of this was the British Indian Association, which Sir Syed established to try to increase cooperation between the two communities. I think this is enough for today's lecture. Here I'm going to give you an assignment, and your assignment is you have to explain the two major obstacles to good relations between the Muslims and the British according to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. So do write this question in your notebook. In your neat notebook, please make a margin line, must write today's day and date, and please maintain your index. Thank you so much, dear students, for watching this video. I'll come again with another video with another topic. Till then, bye.